In 1981, Wendy Poga was born. Her parents moved to Miami, Florida, USA, in 1979 from Colombia. Wendy was a daddy's girl, and her father adored her. It was a big blow for the 6-year-old when her father died in a plane crash. Her mother had to get a job as a secretary at a school to support herself and her children. Later, the mother remarried, and 3 more children were born from the new marriage. Wendy had to grow up quickly. As the eldest daughter, she took care of her younger siblings and helped her mother with everything. As a teenager, she began volunteering at a shelter for homeless animals. After graduating from high school, Wendy attended a beauty academy in Miami, where she studied to become a makeup artist. In February 2002, at the age of 20, Wendy met Michelle and Scott at the beauty academy. Michelle was surrounded by female attention at the academy, which was mostly attended by girls with few guys. He rode a motorcycle to school, and many students admired him. Wendy caught Michelle's interest, and they began dating. For Wendy, this was her first love. Michelle was 10 years older than her, and he seemed like an adult, reliable man. He wanted to open his own beauty salon, and eventually he planned to have a whole network of salons. He was ambitious, purposeful, and self-confident, and Wendy liked that about him. Michelle promised to help Wendy reveal her potential, saying they could achieve great things together in the beauty industry. Believing him, Wendy moved in with him a few months later, and they got married on October 10, 2002. They went on a honeymoon for 3 days. At 5:30 in the morning on October 14, 2002, the phone rang at Wendy's mother Miriam's house. Alarmed, she answered to hear her son-in-law, Michelle, asking where her daughter was. Confused, she told him that they were supposed to return from their trip that day. Michelle explained that they had an argument at 5 a.m., and he had gone to see his mother, trying several times to call Wendy, but she didn't answer. Worried, she began calling her daughter, but there was no response. At 6 a.m., a worker in a warehouse parking lot discovered Wendy's body lying covered in blood between the cars. He immediately called 911. The police arrived and found her lifeless body, which was so disfigured that it was impossible to identify her at first. She had numerous injuries and there were blood spatters on nearby cars indicating the crime occurred in the parking lot. However, the murder weapon was missing. An autopsy revealed Wendy had received 20 blows from a blunt object, presumably a tire iron, and had also been strangled. The cause of death was determined to be trauma from a blow to the head. The medical examiner estimated she was killed between 3 and 5 a.m. A toxicology report showed a high dose of sleeping pills and painkillers in her system, explaining the lack of defensive wounds. She had been incapacitated and unable to resist. The police reported Wendy's murder to her husband and mother. Wendy's mother never liked Michelle, believing he was arrogant, vain, hot-tempered, and aggressive. She had always been puzzled by what her intelligent and beautiful daughter saw in him. Wendy and Michelle had moved in together quickly, renting a small apartment where they slept on the floor. Despite their financial struggles, they took out a $1 million life insurance policy with Michelle as the beneficiary. Wendy's mother was suspicious about the urgency of this insurance policy since they didn't even have children yet, but she chose not to interfere in their relationship. In September, Wendy confided in her mother that she was pregnant, leading to the rushed marriage on October 10, 2002. Wendy's mother had no idea that the man her daughter married harbored dark secrets. Michelle had a criminal past, having participated in an armed robbery 6 years earlier and engaging in petty swindling. Michelle was considered a suspect by the police. When questioned, he repeated his story about their quarrel and claimed Wendy left, but there were inconsistencies in his account. According to forensic experts, Wendy had been killed before 5 a.m., contradicting his timeline. The detectives confronted Michelle, asking him to provide a DNA sample and take a polygraph test, which he refused. Investigators began to carefully examine information about him, studying his call records. They discovered that he had called his ex-girlfriend Yolanda several times the night of the murder, and geolocation data from both their phones indicated they were at the crime scene. The detectives invited Yolanda, 28, in for questioning. She claimed she knew nothing about Wendy and her murder, and since the police had no evidence against her, they let her go. Meanwhile, Michel showed little grief for Wendy. Instead, he immediately contacted the insurance company to claim the $1 million policy. However, since the investigation was ongoing, the company refused to pay him. Furious, Michel believed the insurance company had deceived him and filed a civil lawsuit against them, demanding the money. When Wendy's family learned about this trial, they became convinced he had killed her for the insurance payout. During the proceedings, Michel's testimony was inconsistent, leading to a criminal case being opened against him in 2005. He was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. The lawsuit for the insurance money was ultimately lost, and the payout went to Wendy's mother. Investigators were gathering evidence and became increasingly sure that Michel was responsible for Wendy's murder and that Yolanda had assisted him. The detectives began working closely with Yolanda, hoping she would reveal the full truth. In 2011, they called her in for questioning, presenting evidence of correspondence between her and Michel that hinted at a murder plot. Upon hearing this, Yolanda agreed to cooperate with the investigation. Yolanda revealed that when Michel began dating Wendy, he was still involved with her. They had been in a relationship for 2 years, and Michel treated Yolanda's daughter as his own. She had no idea he was also dating Wendy and had plans to marry her. In July 2002, Michel abruptly ended his relationship with Yolanda and moved in with Wendy, claiming he needed time to figure things out. Later, Yolanda discovered that Michel had been unfaithful and was infuriated. When she confronted him, he admitted he had plans to kill Wendy for the insurance money. Shocked, Yolanda felt torn, but held on to the hope that Michel would return to her. She was unaware of the true extent of his intentions. A few days later, Michel called Yolanda asking for her help in devising a murder plan. They considered various methods, including making it look like an accident, but their initial plan to drown Wendy fell apart when Wendy sensed something was off with the pills in her drink. On October 13th, Michel and Wendy stayed one more night at the hotel near the airport. After a seemingly normal dinner, Michel slipped drugs into Wendy's drink, causing her to pass out. He then took her out of the room through a back exit and placed her in the car. They drove past Yolanda's house, and upon seeing them, Yolanda followed. Michel drove to a deserted parking lot behind a warehouse and signaled Yolanda to come over. When Yolanda arrived, she saw Michel covered in blood with a tire iron in hand. He threw the weapon into a river and washed himself off in the water. Yolanda, frightened, was approached by a police patrol car, but managed to convince the officers that her boyfriend was simply unwell. After the murder, Michel moved in with Yolanda, but their relationship quickly soured. He became aggressive and threatened her, reminding her of his involvement in Wendy's murder. Terrified, Yolanda eventually broke up with him, fearing for her life but also hesitant to testify against him. The police offered Yolanda a deal, complete immunity in exchange for her testimony. With that assurance, she agreed to cooperate. The trial began in 2014, 12 years after Wendy's murder. Michel chose to represent himself, despite lacking legal education or experience. At the trial, Michel muttered incoherently, and many of his inappropriate questions were rejected by the judge. Frustrated, he lost his temper, threatening Wendy's mother and other participants in the trial. As a result, he was charged with contempt of court and sentenced to 30 days in prison. Eventually, he regained his lawyer. Michel claimed during the trial that he didn't know what happened to Wendy, insisting that she had met other men and gone to a club that night. He suggested that she returned in the morning, they had a quarrel, and she left, believing she ran into some scoundrel in the parking lot who killed her. However, there was no corroborating evidence for his story. Hotel staff did not see her leave around 5 a.m., and CCTV cameras failed to capture her exit. Furthermore, forensic experts concluded that Wendy was killed hours earlier, and toxicology reports showed she had consumed a high dose of sleeping pills and painkillers, making it impossible for her to drive. The prosecution presented strong evidence of calls between Yolanda and Michel on the night of the murder, alongside geolocation data indicating they were at the crime scene. Michel could not adequately explain his presence there. insisting that the calls were about his concerns for his daughter's health, a claim Yolanda refuted. Crucially, a business card from the motorcycle dealership where Michel purchased his motorcycle was found at the crime scene, bearing his fingerprints. How could it have ended up there if he was never present? The most damning evidence against Michel was Yolanda's testimony, where she detailed their murder plot. Although she did not witness the murder, she saw the blood, and later divers recovered the murder weapon from the river, matching the description provided. Yolanda also revealed that the pregnancy test Wendy took was faked, an attempt by Michel to hastily marry her, as she was never actually pregnant. During the trial, Michel ridiculed Yolanda, asserting that no man in his right mind would leave a beautiful woman like Wendy for someone who was older and had a child. He even accused Yolanda of killing Wendy out of jealousy, causing her to break down in tears on the stand. After 3 hours of deliberation, the jury found 42-year-old Michel guilty of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. In 2013, Wendy's family filed a civil lawsuit against him for wrongful death, and the court ordered Michel to pay them $44 million. However, he did not have the means to pay, and the family knew they would likely never see that money. Nonetheless, they found solace in the verdict, finally feeling that justice had been served for their daughter after so many years. Share your thoughts about this story in the comments, and don't forget to like this video. Thanks for watching.